Gerry Anderson's early series imagine a future that can be organised. The world's function, authority holds, and competence is enough to keep disorder under control. Across these shows, that idea is built, tested, and refined, and eventually pushed to its limits. By the time Joe 90 arrives, Anderson's worlds still work, but they no longer reassure. And that is the turning point. Because once a world stops reassuring, it stops justifying itself. And once that happens, it cannot return to what it was before. From that point on, Anderson is no longer building a future, he's trying to recover one. And recovery turns out to be much harder than construction. Before that point is fully confronted, there is an earlier disruption. In the Secret Service, the system does not disappear, nor does it come under pressure. It becomes concealed. For the first time, the organisation cannot present itself openly as a stabilising force. It operates within an ordinary setting, disguised and partially obscured, dependent on remaining unseen. This introduces a structural problem. An organisation designed to impose order can no longer appear as order. It must hide inside something else. And once an organisation has to conceal itself in order to function, it loses the clarity that previously justified it. The organisation still exists, but it is no longer fully legible. And that is the beginning of the instability that later series will make explicit. The first attempt to recover that original idea comes with UFO. At first glance, this looks like a continuation. The structure is familiar. There is an organisation, a command hierarchy, advanced technology, and a clear operational purpose. Shadow appears to be another version of the functional systems Anderson had already perfected. But something has been lost. This is no longer an organisation that removes pressure. It is an organisation that absorbs it. The tone shifts immediately. This is not reassurance, it is strain. The organisation still exists, but it is no longer clean or self-contained. It operates within a recognisable contemporary world, one that resists being organised so neatly. Resources are limited, missions fail, decisions cannot be undone, and for the first time, consequences linger. What was once procedural becomes burdensome, and that burden is carried by the people inside the system. Ed Straker is not a calm coordinator. He is a man under constant pressure, making decisions that fracture his personal life and accumulate over time. Authority no longer feels neutral, it feels costly. This is the crucial shift. In earlier series, the system justified itself through success. Here, it must justify itself through sacrifice. Shadow still works, but it no longer feels stable. It has weight. And once an organisation has weight, it can no longer be taken for granted. If UFO places its own system under pressure, Space 1999 removes it entirely. Not gradually, immediately. The premise itself ensures this. Moonbase Alpha is cut off, drifting through space without support, without oversight, and without any larger structure to depend on. There is no organisation behind it, no chain of command beyond survival, no organisation maintaining continuity, no framework that carries from one situation to the next. What remains is not a system under strain, it is the absence of a system altogether. And that absence is absolute. Every episode presents a new environment, a new threat, a new set of rules that cannot be predicted or integrated into anything larger. There is no accumulation, no persistence, no sense that the world holds together beyond the immediate moment. This is where Anderson's model breaks, because without a stable structure, the future cannot be organised, it cannot be managed, it can only be encountered. What remains is not a functioning world, but a sequence of situations. And once the system disappears, nothing replaces it. By the time of Terrahawks, The problem is no longer how to build the system, it is what to do when that system can no longer be presented straight. Terrahawks appears on the surface to return to familiar territory. There is an organisation with a command structure, a defined enemy, and a technological framework that echoes earlier work. But everything is heightened. Characters are broader. Dialogue is more overt. Threats are exaggerated. Tone shifts towards the comic, the stylized, the deliberately artificial. This is not a restoration, it is exposure. The system has not been rebuilt, it has been made visible. And once it is visible, it becomes something else. The elements that once created stability now draw attention to themselves. The structure is no longer invisible support. It is part of the spectacle. And that changes how it functions, because a system that can be seen clearly can also be questioned. And a system that can be questioned cannot operate with the same certainty. Terrahawks does not abandon the Andersdon model, it reveals it. And in revealing it, it undermines it. The final attempt to recover that original idea comes with Space Precinct. Here, Anderson returns to something grounded. A police precinct, a defined jurisdiction, a procedural structure. On paper, this is a return to fundamentals: organisation, authority, routine, a system designed to operate continuously. But this is as far as the reconstruction can go, because the system no longer defines the world, it exists within it. The universe surrounding Space Precinct is varied, inconsistent, and only partially controlled. Different species, different environments, different forms of behaviour exist beyond the reach of any single structure. The precinct can impose order locally. It cannot extend that order outward. And that limitation is decisive. Earlier Anderson organisations created worlds. This organisation occupies one. It functions, but it does not stabilise. It cannot make the wider environment coherent. This is not a failure of execution, it is a limit of the idea itself. This system can still work, but only in a contained space. It can no longer organise the future as a whole. Across these later series, Anderson is no longer building a stable future. He is testing whether it can be rebuilt. In UFO, the system becomes burdened. In Space 1999, it disappears. In Terrahawks, it is exposed. And in Space Precinct, it returns, but only within strict limits. The belief that once held everything together, that systems properly designed can stabilise the future, never fully recovers. Not because it was simply wrong, but because it cannot survive being questioned. Once doubt enters the system, it changes how that system is seen. It becomes visible. And once it is visible, it can no longer operate with the same certainty. There are other directions in Anderson's later work: parody, reinvention, and eventually digital reconstruction, but none of them restores the stable, coherent future his early series established. What remains instead is something more complex, not a collapse, but a transformation. Because what Anderson's later work reveals is that not that these worlds fail, it is that they cannot remain unquestioned. And once that happens, the future they support becomes something else. Thanks very much for listening. That concludes my 3-part series on Gerry Anderson, but there will be a video on Roberta Lee in 2 weeks' time. If you don't know who Roberta Lee is, but you're a fan of Gerry Anderson, then you probably will want to see that. So keep your eye out. But thanks very much again, and I will be back on another day with another television show.